Can we just call him the sinister serpent sovereign of Snake's Mountain instead of King Hiss? Well, irrespective of what we call him, this ruler of snake men has been the recurring snake problem of the Eternians and the Masters. At first glance, King Hiss might pass for a human, but his five-headed snake form is hard to miss. King Hiss is, of course, a force in battle, but he's also a wielder of magic, so potent that the sorceress of Castle Grayskull puts it on par with the ancient and venerable elders themselves. Defeated in ancient times by the formidable Hordak, King Hiss is as resilient as they come. He's been biding his time, sealed away beneath the Snake Mountain, and appeared time and again in animated shows and comics. In this video, we will explore King Hiss in all his slithery glory, to try and figure out what it is about his anatomy that makes him one of the strongest foes to He-Man.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Who is King Hiss, a human or serpent god? In the comics, King Hiss was the big boss of the snake men of Eternia. While his people were humanoid snakes, King Hiss was actually a bunch of snakes bundled up to look like one guy. This sneaky snake man and his crew wanted to conquer planets, and Eternia was their latest project. But things got tricky when Eternia's protectors, Hero and Eldor, stepped in. They chucked Hiss and his gang into a sort of limbo-like zone. A few thousand years later, Skeletor lets them out. He's curious about sneaky secrets, so Hiss teams up with Skeletor, but let's be real, they're both planning to backstab each other once He-Man is out of the picture. In fact, Skeletor would have been wise to beware of King Hiss, because King Hiss was no lightweight. He's got some serious magic powers, and in the comics, he gives Skeletor and Hordak a run for their money. And as far as his snake form is concerned, it has got this crazy hypno power that can even mess with He-Man's head. In the 2002 reboot, King Hiss' story gets a bit of a tweak. This time, he's busted out of space jail not by Skeletor, but by the Snake King's loyal sidekick, General Ratlor, and Cobra Khan, a newbie snake man. They get an assist from Evil Lyn, Skeletor's right-hand woman. Interestingly, in the show, Snake Mountain, Skeletor's evil lair, used to be King Hiss's pad. But that's not all. What's even crazier is that it was actually the stone-cold body of Serpos, the snake men's god. So, King Hiss swings by to reclaim his old throne, at least for a hot minute. The sorceress later reveals that King Hiss' magic is ancient, like Elder's level old. In fact, his spells are like snake energy tendrils, good for grabbing, tying up, or poking holes in his enemies, and his snake form has a venomous bite in each of its several heads. Turns out, King Hiss was causing trouble on Eternia way back, even before the Elders ruled when King Grayskull was the bad guy. Hiss and his slithery squad were duking it out with Grayskull's troops, trying to take over, but then Hordak and his evil horde crashed the party and target the snake men first in an attempt to knock out the competition. After duking it out with Grayskull, Hiss and his crew somehow make it through, only to face off with the newly formed Elders, who rose up after Grayskull bit the dust fighting Hordak and his horde, who ended up trapped in their own limbo. What does he look like? How many heads does he have? In DC Comics He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, we meet King Hiss in one of his most formidable forms. I'll get to the backstory later on when I discuss his crazy powers, but for now, let's focus on how this guy looks. So the comics spelled out two of King Hiss's forms. First, King Hiss could pass for just a beefy dude. If you can overlook that, his skin was all snaky and reptilian. Additionally, he was wearing his shiny gold armor that was formidable enough to sustain hits from He-Man without suffering any damage. But of course, this was not the real form of King Hiss. Here, he was actually just passing off as someone else. Who? Well, he had managed to take control of the body of He-Man's father. Later in the comic, we get to see Hiss's "I'm about to wreck your day" form, and it's a whole different ballgame. The guy's human guise was a front, and his torso erupted into a bundle of snake heads, each one looking like it just got done hissing at the world's most terrifying thing. These slithery heads had the red-eyed, fang-bearing anger look, and were ready to snap at anything that moved. Now, a few iterations have 5 heads, but the number of King Hiss's heads has varied from story to story. But one thing that remains constant is that one of the heads takes the lead and controls the others, something like the central head of King Ghidorah from the Godzilla universe. His lower half keeps the armor on, blending his warrior status with his snakeness, and the central face is all aglow with that same eerie red. So I guess this is King Hiss in full-on scare mode, no doubt.
It's just you and me, Hiss.
How fitting it should end here.
Hiss possesses a serpent's tongue? What's crazy about King Hiss is that he can speak while in his snake form. In fact, when he transforms his body into the 5 snakes, all of these snakeheads speak in harmony. The Rise of the Snakemen Part 2, which was the 5th episode of the 2nd season of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. King Hiss tries to kill Evelyn, but stops. While speaking to her in this scene, all the 5 heads speak as one.
You can't turn me to stone! My eyes are closed!
Body Snatcher or Bedrock of Truth. What's his most intriguing power? Can he truly wear host bodies as a second skin? In issue 11 of the Masters of the Universe comic that I was spelling out earlier, King Hiss was a slithery blast from the past, and the once mighty king of the Snake Men. He appeared deep down in Subterranea's Ring of Death, right under Mount Zoar. He-Man, face to face with what he thought was his dad, is shocked to realize that it's actually King Hiss wearing King Randor like last season's fashion. Mossman reveals that King Hiss is the name that echoed through the ages, notorious for his rattling reign of terror. He-Man, feeling the sting of the trickery, goes full tilt at King Hiss, but it's like bringing a knife to a serpent fight. King Hiss is on another level of power. King Hiss lets slip his grand plan, all while gloating about his devotion to the goddess Serpos, the heavyweight of the Eternian divinity. In the past, before He-Man, and before Eternia became Eternia, King Hiss ruled the land. Back then, his big idea was to cozy up to Serpos' power, get a supercharge and overpower his goddess. But as with all tales of wanting it all, he bit off more than he could chew. Tapping into the goddess-level mojo came at a steep price. His people died, and he's been the lone survivor, biding his time ever since. He spent all these years plotting to reclaim Eternia and send the humans to their doom. Amidst the eeriness of the realm of death, King Hiss stirred the pot. Because of a secret power, his Snake Men had come back to life. He has the Snake Men attack He-Man and the crew. He-Man, muscles flexing and jaw set, took the fight to King Hiss and demanded to know where Randor was. But King Hiss was just spitting taunts like venom, and revealed that he's been masquerading as Randor for ages, maybe even since Adam was young. So in reality, Randor had been out of the picture for who knows how long, and Adam was the golden ticket, the one King Hiss needed to crack open the Star Seed. Turns out, Adam was the spark that got the Snake Men back in action, all while King Hiss was playing Puppet Master, dangling the hope of saving the sorceress to get what he wants. As King Hiss knocks Adam out cold, his slithery minions take him toward the final showdown at Zoar's doorstep. Meanwhile, Mossman's got Teela in a holdback and tries to make her proceed with caution. So yeah, King Hiss could snatch someone's body and live within as if the body were a husk. He did so with Randor and who knows how many others. In the comments, he mentions that Randor was but the latest of such unfortunate victims.
And ruling Eternia once more!
Is King Hiss immune to flames? In the 2002 show, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe Season 2 Episode 12, things heat up, and it answers this burning question of ours. In the episode, the Snake Men were hard at waking up Serpos, who, as I mentioned earlier, was their deity. Meanwhile, Prince Adam and Fisto are hot on the trail of Cobra Khan, one of the most important henchmen of King Hiss. Interestingly, Cobra Khan had been given a surface-side banishment by General Rattler. Meanwhile, Count Marzo, stuck in his less-than-stellar dwarf form, bumps into Evelyn. She buffs him up to his true, mighty self, but takes away his amulet and ropes him into a deal to help spring Hordak from the Well of Darkness. Cobra Khan overhears their scheming and slithers the news to King Hiss. The Snake-in-Chief gets wind of Hordak's possible comeback and leaves to shut down Evelyn and the Count. The Masters crash their party, and King Hiss, with Rattler and a few minions in tow, head to the Well of Darkness. Just when you think things can't get hotter, Mossman and He-Man bring some extra muscle. Evelyn and Marzo are mid-magic, trying to summon Hordak back, when King Hiss decides to take a shortcut via the River of Fire. He-Man and Battlecat send King Hiss and his crew for a dip in the river, and it seemed like they were as good as Indian tikka kebab. But of course, King Hiss wasn't done yet. Later in the episode, we see King Hiss and Rattler shrug off their scorched skins, all smug, because it turns out they're not just immune to flames, they also thrive on them. So to answer the question, yeah, King Hiss isn't just immune to flames, he's practically flame retardant. Can he teleport? In the 12th and 13th episode of the 2002 show, King Hiss showed many a time that he could teleport. During a fight sequence with He-Man on the River of Fire, our boy Hiss zapped through thin air after transforming himself into green energy. Later, he gets command of Serpos, and once again, he zaps from the ground to Serpos' head in a similar fashion. It's not the coolest thing to look at, but it definitely gives King Hiss an edge when it comes to duels. And let's be honest, teleportation is one of the handiest powers there is. So yeah, good for you, Hissy. Does he have magical abilities? King Hiss, with his magical mojo, is as real as it gets. The guy has got a bag of tricks that goes way back. Magic's so old, the sorceress herself compared it to the Elder's own brand of spellcraft. By default, King Hiss looks pretty human, but that's just a facade. At will, he can ditch the human suit to reveal a twisty, wriggly bunch of snakes from the waist up, which, you have to admit, is impossible without a bit of magic. Now, of course, he's a king of an ancient civilization, so his magic isn't just your run-of-the-mill hocus-pocus. We're talking about a serpentine sorcery that's as flexible as he is. Need something snatched or smashed? Hiss is your man. Or, well, your snake. Obstacle in the way? He can shred it without a second thought. And if you think you've got him cornered, he conjures up a barrier faster than you can blink. Furthermore, King Hiss can also pull off some remote telekinesis to make things move without laying a finger on them. He can even have Snake Mountain dancing to his tune with just the wave of his hand, but more on this later. However, in the comics, his magical skills get a tactical advantage. He amps up his snake men and gives them the ability to move with a kind of precision and speed that's not exactly standard issue. In the 2010s, his sinister spellbook got an upgrade with the new power to overshadow folks, which is what we were discussing earlier. He could now wear people's bodies like they're just another layer of skin, and the unlucky hosts do not live to tell the tale. Can he control Snake Mountain? Well, yes, he can very well control the Stone Cold Snake Mountain when it's in the Serpos form. Now, the interesting thing to know about Serpos is that in the 2002 series, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Serpos had been trapped by the Elders of Eternia in the form of Snake Mountain, but after King Hiss freed Serpos, he used the entity to wreak havoc on Eternia. But once King Hiss had been defeated, He-Man also defeated Serpos, and the deity once again transformed into his mountain form. Is King Hiss immortal? King Hiss has been lurking around Eternia since way back in the day. Is he immortal? Well, he's been around long enough to make that claim. Freed from a limbo in the 2002 series, King Hiss is let loose by General Rattler and Cobra Khan, with a little help from Evil Lyn. This ancient serpent makes a homecoming to Snake Mountain, which used to be his old stomping grounds. The guy's got history with Eternia's mightiest, tangling with King Grayskull even before the Elders got their act together. When Hordak and his evil horde muscle in, they sideline King Hiss and his slithery squad before duking it out with Grayskull. Sure, King Hiss sticks around after the dust settles, but then he's got the Elders and their new champ, Zodak, to deal with. Even with Hordak's beatdown and Grayskull dead, King Hiss keeps on keeping on. He's not the kind to take defeat lying down, so I'd like to believe that King Hiss sure has the longevity that makes someone immortal, whether he's truly undying or just really good at survival. One thing's for sure, he's always been and always will be Eternia's greatest snake problem. We'll be exploring a lot of other characters from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, so if you're a fan of the franchise, or sword and sorcery in general, this is the place to be.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.